Hello, son.
Hello.
You know, I grew up on the mean streets of Detroit. Not so much fun. Charles Leclerc, not just an F1 driver, not just an F1 driver who wins Monaco. He grew up in Monaco. Imagine that. There's like no other city like it and no other race like the Monaco Grand Prix. And all the yachts, all the celebrities, all the superstars, all the media. It's so big that it's the one race they advertise in the US.
Yeah, part of the triple crown of racing, I guess they call it. Monaco, the Indy 500, which happens to take place in the same weekend, which is always fun. It's the best weekend in motorsport, I think. And then, the third one is the 24-hour Le Mans, which there's only a few drivers that have ever competed in all three, and I'm pretty sure that Fernando Alonso has taken part in all three at some point in his career.
He has done all three and he's won two. I don't know if anyone, maybe Max would be the type of driver. He's just so locked into F1, though. I'm not sure he will ever do any other sport, certainly motorsport, other than F1, but I could see him giving it a try. All right, you ready to go, son?
I am ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, the American take on Formula One. We just finished watching the Monaco Grand Prix, and the curse is broken. Charles Leclerc, he finally wins one after so much bad luck at Monaco. The first driver from Monaco, I think, to win in decades. Patrick, son, what's your takeaways from the Monaco Grand Prix?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the curse, if you can call it that, is over. It's been lifted. Leclerc takes the win from pole. It's generally been pretty straightforward over the last, decade or so to win from pole. Unfortunately, Leclerc really has never had the luck when it comes to that. So this weekend was really all about him and Ferrari and proving a point. It was good to see. I think there were a lot of good storylines that came out of this weekend, and Monaco is always fun. It's one of the most exciting race weekends of the season, albeit generally a rather lackadaisical race. And, after lap one, well, after like turn 6, it was pretty much the same. So,
Right. A lot of people, complain about the race, and with absolute justification. The way the top 10 started from qualifying, that's how they finished. The cars are just so big now that there's really not much you can do, I think, to make that race more exciting from the perspective of actual driving, of overtakes. Even strategy will play a limited role. This is an old street course. They've been racing it there, since almost from the beginning of F1 and a race in Monaco since I think probably the 30s. But there's not much more you can do, I think, unless you create some gimmicks, require 3 pit stops or something odd. You either need to make the decision to move it or accept that it's part of F1 history. Vegas notwithstanding, Miami notwithstanding, the glamour race in motorsport, and just sort of accept that. And what happens on Saturday is basically what happens on Sunday for the most part.
Yeah, we always get this sort of perspective that Saturday, the qualifying, is actually the most important day in Monaco. Realistically, it kind of turned out to be that way again this year. But I think, like you said, even Hamilton mentioned, how really the only way to get anything interesting to happen is to force, multiple pit stops and do kind of these weird Monaco only rules. But I think for the most part, this is a race that is just synonymous with Formula One. And it's going to be really challenging for people to let that go. Even though I get pissed at people because, they're all like, we're having so many races in the US, and they complain about nobody in the US cares about this. only celebrities show up to these races and they don't know anything about F1 and blah, blah, blah. The races suck. And then you mention Monaco and they go, oh, yeah, that's great. It's awesome. Love it. I'm like, you're stupid and you're delusional and it's all the same thing. So I don't know. It frustrates me to no end hearing these people just complain to complain because they don't like change. They don't want anything to move forward. They just want to keep it stagnant. Look, I love Monaco. I think it's great. This will piss a lot of Brits off, but I would rather have Monaco than Silverstone on the calendar.
Ooh.
But I don't necessarily think that Monaco, in and of itself, the race deserves a place on the Formula One calendar anymore.
Yeah, I think, like I said, they need to make a firm decision, because F1 Liberty Media, more control over the F1 broadcast, over the setup of the course, advertisements, promotions. And we all know why they have the race there. It's tradition and it's money. And you either say, look, we're going to cut a long-term deal with Monaco because of tradition and money. I think the worst thing would be to keep Monaco, but just add a lot of gimmicks that just don't belong in F1. That's it. There were some great storylines this race. I mean, after every race, we see the winners on the podium, the champagne celebration, the national anthem. This one, just genuine emotion from Leclerc. He finally won. Emotion from the team Ferrari, even the Prince of Monaco. I'm not sure if there's a king of Monaco, but there's clearly a Prince of Monaco, and he seemed touched. So that was great to see.
Yeah, I too do not know if there's a king of Monaco. Although that'd be pretty sick if there was. He's just a literal king of Monaco. Maybe that's Leclerc. Now he's taken that title. But yeah, it was really, really cool to see kind of all the celebrations, and you could hear it on the radio, Leclerc's radio, even going through kind of the last couple of laps when they basically knew he was going to win this race. And to
I
see
wasn't so
all of those
certain.
guys, I know.
I wasn't so certain because Ferrari has figured out ways. Right. Ferrari's figured out ways in the past.
He's going to get like a last lap puncture and won't be able to limp home. Yeah, I was watching like the Sky broadcast, and there's even like 5 laps left. They're like, oh, Leclerc's going to win this race, and what an incredible achievement and weekend. It's like, damn, like you're going to bring the curse out. Like it's coming for Leclerc now. He's definitely going to lose now. Luckily that didn't happen, but it was really good to see. Everyone that was at that race was super excited. It was very similar kind of feeling or sentiment almost to when Lando won a few weeks ago in Miami. Just kind of everyone loved to see it.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, that's another storyline for starters. We've already had, 4 winners this year, right?
Yeah.
And who didn't win, but came in second, young Oscar Piastri. I mean, that McLaren, that car, and that young team, though Lando is quite the veteran now, they're really showing up, which I love to see. That was great. I mean, we've now got locked in Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren can all win. Mercedes, I'm still skeptical. Lewis was making comments before the race, almost implying that George will always win in qualifying, almost implying that Mercedes is favoring him, which they should, although I doubt they are. And to his credit, I mean, was he on hard? No, he was on mediums for almost the entire race. I mean,
the whole race.
Yeah.
Those 3, 5th, 6th, 7th, all came in during the red flag and pitted for mediums because they started on hards, which did not benefit them at all. And because Monaco is so challenging to pass for F1 cars, Russell just was sitting on mediums, driving incredibly slowly for like 50 laps or whatever that was until Max pitted and came up right behind him and pushed him along. But
well, it's funny because before we get to the big accident at the start, there are so many intricate rules in F1 that I thought it was funny because I was watching the Sky broadcast originally on ESPN, and after the accident they had the standing restart, and Even Martin Brundle was sort of like, wait, did everyone cross? And, him and Crofty were sort of going through the intricacies of, well, not everyone, I think Joe didn't, cross sector one. Or, it's like you have to get to a certain amount before no matter what happens, because Sainz, he had locked up, he had the puncture, and then he could have fallen all the way back. But he got to restart, what was it, fourth, I think? Because they just sort of like third, they just put everyone back in their original starting order. But I just thought that was interesting. But the accident, what are your feelings with Magnussen and Sergio Perez, that big accident, and it took out Nico Hulkenberg, who's been having a hell of a year. I think after Max and now Charles and Lando and Oscar and Yuki, we need to talk about Nico. But anyway, before that, what are your thoughts on that accident?
That accident was just so, I guess, I don't even know what the right words are for it. I think it was mostly just a shit happens moment. Like, K-Mag, I think, has been driving way, way too aggressively in that Haas, especially in some of these circumstances where he feels this is the only point in time where you can pass or get ahead. And then he's just, trying to maintain that position. And I think he was a little too aggressive, sticking his nose in where maybe it was relatively obvious that Perez was going to try to close the door on him. That said, Perez maybe should have been a little bit more aware, understand the situation a little bit better, and not, push over so close to the wall. On the whole, though, it's a first lap. You're scrapping for position. You're essentially going 3 wide, and you make contact. And because it's such a fast part of the track, it's narrow. There's walls on both sides. It turns into a whole big mess. I think for me, I would place a little bit more blame on Magnussen just because he can see what is happening in front of him. All he has to do is back out a little bit. But I think on the whole, it's just like, look, I'm racing. And we're both racing, and it's not a good place to race, I guess.
Right. Well, my view is similar. It was tough to make the call in real time, but after watching the replays, I thought it was a racing incident / mostly Sergio's fault. Magnussen moved up and sort of had the right to be there. So I think the stewards made the right call. There was no punishments. There was no, drop in grid, nothing, no penalty points, which Magnussen is, he's up there. That said, I fault Magnussen because look, he's not going to outrace. That was the first lap. That was basically the first corner of the first lap, practically. He's not going to outrace that Red Bull. If you manage to somehow pass Sergio, I know the overtakes are hard. Sergio would overtake him at some point. Haas is already strapped for resources, not because they are legitimately, Gene Haas won't invest more in the team. And so now, more millions of dollars wasted. So even though that I think that's a racing incident, and in a race, if I had to, assign blame, it would more go onto Sergio. There's just simply no excuse for what Magnussen did, I thought. It's just, there's no gain. The only gain is on that corner. He'll get ahead. Sergio will back off. And then at some point later in the race, Sergio will get ahead of him. So now what have you done? You've taken your teammate out, cost for that, who had been getting points. You've destroyed your car practically, millions of dollars. So I just, Magnussen has not been having a good year. And I just thought, well, this is one more reason why they should not bring him back.
Yeah, I guess to that end, right? Because for me, thinking there's no way Kevin Magnussen should come back next year, let alone even finish out this season, because he's just costing that team, like you said, resources, points, whatever, and fairly close to a race ban in terms of penalty points. So I'm thinking, why not just bring back Mick Schumacher or somebody? Stick him in there, get some sort of notoriety back into your team, and we all know Nico is going to move on from this team, so you're going to have to find drivers. Mick has raced a couple seasons in F1. I don't know. I prefer that over Magnussen right now.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, the whole point of Magnussen really, instead of say Mick Schumacher, was, well, he's not going to mess up as much. He's not going to make as many mistakes.
More
Sort of
reliable, yeah.
right. Sort of the NFL mentality. It's like, mistakes cost us games. We lose because of mistakes. You know, I'm not sure that's the case anymore. So I
Yeah.
think that's a good point. Have him in. Speaking of replacing drivers, I mean, the rumors are now that Ocon, who seems to piss everyone off, I'm not sure it's always justified. I think some people just sort of come across as pricks without even meaning to. you know, what do you think? I mean, because that was stupid of him. And, now the rumors are he might even get replaced in Canada, in Montreal in 2 weeks, which I don't think so.
I don't think he's getting replaced that soon. But like I've kind of always liked Ocon and his just sort of don't give a fuck mentality. And he's definitely been involved in some relatively significant incidents over the course of his career that have really rubbed people the wrong way, both fans, drivers, teams, all that kind of stuff. So I, I think it's not that crazy to believe that he would get replaced, especially because most of the recent incidents have been with his teammates. This weekend, right? There was no reason for him to slam into his teammate Gasly right before the red flag came out and ended his race. Essentially, I assume broke the suspension on his vehicle. Yeah, both of those guys came together in Montreal last year, if I recall correctly, taking out both of them and ruining their, points finishes there. He's had plenty of run-ins with Alonso when Alonso was at Alpine, and there's just a long list of times he's been involved in just like these sort of ridiculous and mostly unnecessary incidents, particularly with his teammates. And I think the Alpine bosses are kind of fed up with it. They're over it. They don't want any more intra-team turmoil. And I can understand from that perspective. I think he's been a good driver for them for the most part. But some of these things, like, look, dude, you're costing us our team, and it's just the return on investment is no longer there.
Right. I mean, for a number of reasons, Alpine is shit. And they've been shit for a while. And, when you're a shit team, it's, well, what can we do? Sort of an artificial boost. Well, he's French, so we're a French team. We'll have a French driver. He's got experience. He's won a race. He should be reliable. I'm not sure those are paying dividends anymore, like you said. Right now, we've got, let's see, just 24 points separating Red Bull and Ferrari, which and the way Ferrari are improving at what seems to be a faster rate than Red Bull, we've got a race on our hands for the constructor. I'm still not convinced we have a race on our hands for the Drivers' Championship. Let's see, Max is 31 ahead of Charles. But even if Ferrari continue to improve, we can sort of imagine Max winning, then Lando winning, or possibly Oscar. We can imagine Max winning, and then Charles winning, or possibly Carlos. Maybe George or Lewis get a win in there this year. But almost every race we're expecting Max to be there, while there's several others competing. So I'm not sure. I think Red Bull needs to figure out what's going on because they could lose the constructor. I still favor them, but it's possible. I think, though, Max, he doesn't have this locked up, but he definitely is still the odds-on favorite.
Yeah, overall, I think I agree with that. Max, I think, was pretty calm this weekend, a little bit annoyed at their sort of lack of stability and therefore qualifying pace in that car. But, he knew he was going to get decent points and just kept the car going. He didn't lose too much ground to Leclerc, but I think, like you're saying, Red Bull, they're not as far ahead of Ferrari and McLaren as they've been in the last few seasons. And with Perez once again starting to struggle, I think things are looking a lot more tense at Red Bull than they have in the past. I mean, Max alone would have won the Constructors' Championship last season. I don't foresee that happening again this season based on the results we've had so far. Last season we had 3 total winners, 1 time Sainz, I think maybe 1 or 2 times Perez, and the rest were Max. This season, through, what is this, 7 races, 8 races? We've had 4 winners, right? So it's a lot closer this season than it was last, and Red Bull's gotta look out, and they've definitely gotta put a little bit more pep in Sergio's step here. Even without the whole crash, I think it's very, very unlikely he scores any points this weekend based on his grid position.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like we said earlier, the top 10 in qualifying finished top 10. He was way out. He was
17th,
well
I think.
outside of that.
Yeah.
Right. So Charles broke the curse. A couple weeks ago, Lando broke the curse. He got his first win. Who do you think's next to get that first big win?
Nico Hulkenberg.
No way.
No, I'm kidding.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
I mean, it's got to be Oscar, right? Like, he's just the only one in a car that realistically is like actually capable of that. Unless there's just some insane shit that happens. Like, Stroll is probably not getting there.
Right. I was thinking Stroll or Yuki could, but it would
Yuki be
require,
interesting, yeah.
maybe crash, weather, rain, multiple pit stops, some errors, just sort of like when Gasly won way back, just a number of incidents that sort of all propel into this sort of unlikely victory. But yeah, I think it's got to be Oscar. Although there's now the other part is, who do we think is going to get a point? Who's first to get a point this year that's pointless? Because the Sauber team is just woeful. Bottas and Zhou, I think, do not have points. Up until this week, Williams had no points, but Albon, what did he finish? 9th, I believe. So he actually now has points. So it's Logan Sargeant, Zhou, and Bottas, I think, are the only ones without points.
Yeah.
What do we think there?
I don't think any of them get points.
Oh, man. Can you imagine a full 20-plus race season, no points?
Yeah. There might be something weird that happens where, Logan ends up with the point. That Sauber is like god awful, though. And they still are doing, seems like average 15-second pit stops. Like, you can't lose that much time and expect to get points, right? So I have to assume that it's got to be Logan of those 3, though I am still iffy on whether or not they ever get any points.
Switching to the salt compound. We've touched on this. Maybe Ocon getting booted. Maybe Sergio getting booted. As far as driver changes, no news is big news when it comes to, talking about rumors. So what are your thoughts on where folks are going to wind up? Because, so for example, we have Albon. He signed that long-term deal, right? So he's locked in. So he's off the market, but probably Logan will be gone this year, if not sooner than this year. Carlos is still looking. Ocon, maybe he'll be out, as the rumors are saying, because, Alpine is fed up with him. The other teams seem to be fed up with him. Who else? Sergio. Rumors are suggesting he will sign for at least one more year at Red Bull. I'm not sure why. That Red Bull will sign him at least through the 2025 season. I don't know if that's going to happen. We still don't know who is going to take that second seat at Mercedes. I don't know. Where do you think the teams are going to wind up next year? Any big changes? Anything you're expecting to hear?
I think Red Bull is not going to sign Sergio before the summer break. And I think they're going to look at where they are in the Constructors' Championship. If they are not a solid 50 points ahead by that time, they're signing Carlos.
That would be a surprise, but I think I'd be more surprised if Carlos waits that long, right? You think he'd want to have his future locked up?
I don't think so. I mean, why would he go to a team that's not competitive over waiting for a potential spot at a competitive team?
I suppose maybe he could sort of play Red Bull, Mercedes off each other, perhaps. You know, I would just think if Red Bull's not going to wait until, let's say, the summer break, Carlos might be like, hey, I don't want to be out of F1. Like Ricardo found himself, but I don't know.
Carlos is too good right now for teams to overlook him or, sign somebody else before he is signed. I think right now Sainz holds all of the cards. So I don't foresee him jumping the gun for any particular reason.
What about Ricardo? Do you think he'll be back? Because we keep hearing, because we know how good Liam Lawson is, young driver from New Zealand, and he's on the sidelines. Meanwhile, Ricardo doing nothing. I mean, look, I like him, and his first several years in F1 were good, but he's just I'm not sure what the value of Daniel Ricciardo is anymore in F1.
Yeah, I think in the car, he's not really providing anything obvious, I guess, that is, benefiting the team, right? He could, in theory, be providing, feedback on setup and all these things that maybe are helping the team and even helping Yuki, but you can do that without being one of the 20 drivers on the grid, right? I mean, that's technically like Liam Lawson's job, and they have other guys that are capable of doing that. So it's very possible that Daniel is still in F1, but maybe not as one of the 20 drivers on the grid. I just think, what is the point when you have other guys who are kind of chomping at the bit to get in there and have sort of proved that they are capable of competing and even beating Yuki, who's currently Daniel's teammate. And Yuki is very much outracing Daniel so far this season. So I don't know what's happening with him. Everybody loves Daniel, and I think that's what's keeping him in F1. There's no reason for him to stay otherwise.
Right. I mean, he's reliable. He hasn't done damage to the car. I don't think he's harming the team like, say, Kevin Magnussen is with Haas. But yeah, I think his time is coming. And F1 is not fair, but Liam Lawson has shown what he can do, and he's there and available. And Daniel is not getting it done. If they keep Ricardo, that's just not good for the sport, in my opinion. I assume we're both on board that Logan Sargeant will be out of F1 by next year.
I assume, unless there's some miracle where all of a sudden now he's beating Albon in qualifying and scoring points and whatever. But so far, he really hasn't shown that that is possible. I think given enough time, he might be able to really show what he's worth, right? Like Yuki was given a lot of time, and now this season, he's really putting it together and he's showing how good he can be and what he's capable of. I think Logan is doing better than he was last year, kind of having fewer ridiculous mistakes, but he's not really benefiting the team in any way. And I think it's very possible, even likely, that he is booted for somebody else, say like a Kimi Antonelli or somebody else.
This is related because we know Lewis is returning next year and he'll be at Ferrari. Carlos is driving very well, but Lewis is a 7-time champion and he brings a new audience, great branding potential. But I mean, we saw that just genuine outpouring of emotion from Ferrari that they won this week in Monaco, and the win was by Charles Leclerc. That outpouring of emotion would have been lesser, I believe, had the win been by Carlos. So do we think this alters the dynamic for next year when Lewis shows up? This is now for sure Charles's team.
I mean, I think it's always been Leclerc's team. For the last 3 years, I've thought that. I don't think Carlos ever was the guy on that team, even though there were certain parts of some seasons where he was driving better. But Leclerc has sort of been Ferrari's light. And I think everybody, the whole Tifosi, everybody at Ferrari in Maranello, they all love Leclerc. And I think it will be a little bit weird for Hamilton stepping into that team. I think people are going to be a little bit off put by him. But all he has to do is win in Italy, and they'll say, okay, we're good with Lewis. So we'll see if he can make that happen.
Funny. We've been comparing Monaco to Las Vegas. And in the sense that, street courses, there's just so much glitz and hype, all the superstars, all the media, rich people showing up. I thought it was funny. I got an email. We have been saying that F1 really needs to expand their facilities there, their presence there in Las Vegas. I have, for example, an F1 museum, an F1 interactive experience. And I got an email the other day saying there's going to be an F1 arcade. That's that sort of sim F1 immersive experience bar gathering place in Las Vegas soon. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I fully expected that to happen. As soon as the first one was sort of announced or completed, I suppose, looked awesome. And it was very obvious to me that that would end up in Las Vegas. I mean, this is now the premier F1 location, I think, in the sport as a whole. Like, Las Vegas is now the center of attention, like it or not. So I'm looking forward to it because I'm not that far away from there. So I will have an opportunity to experience F1 Arcade at some point.
Across the line. That's our segment where we predict the top 5 for the next race. The next race is in Montreal, Canada. Montreal, one of the lovely cities of the world. The race is in 2 weeks. In Across the Line, we select someone. If we get them right, that's 1 point. If we get them in the exact right spot, that's 3 points. Once we select a driver, he's off the board. Patrick, what are the current standings of Across the Line?
Well, current standings after Monaco. Well, before Monaco, I guess. We were sitting on my 20 points to your 17. The top 5 of this race was Leclerc, as we know, Oscar, Carlos, Lando, and then George Russell. So, that said, I scored 3 points this week as I had Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, and then Yuki. So I got 3 points total. Piastri, Leclerc, Norris. I didn't get any of them in the exact position that they finished.
That was, man, you almost had the parlay, what the bettors called, I mean, that was pretty.
It was pretty close.
That was damn close.
You scored 2 points because you got the other 2 guys in the top 5 in Sainz and Russell, but also not in the exact position that they came in. You had Verstappen, Sainz, Perez, Russell, and then Ricciardo. So Sainz P2 instead of P3, right? Only the 1 point there. So that is my 23 points to your 19 after Monaco. So we're still very close. Unfortunately, you get first pick for Montreal.
So, I love Montreal. It's a good track. Last year, it was the champions podium. Max, Alonso, Hamilton, all world champions. I'm not expecting that to happen again. I mean, Aston is just, they're regressing just the way they did last year. They start out good. They throw everything they have at the start, and then they just sort of, by week 5, it's over. I don't think Alonso is sort of giving up, but I think he knows, he's going to do his best, and his best, maybe he'll crack the top 10. So that said, I go first. I think Max is going to come out wanting revenge. I think he's angry at everyone. I think he was bad-mouthing the Monaco Grand Prix as boring, simply because when he's not fighting for wins, he wants to denigrate the race, which is fine. I mean, that's the sort of mentality you need. But I think McLaren is on a hot streak. I mean, it was Lando win, Lando second, Oscar second, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going with Lando Norris.
Dang, that is very interesting. I think leaving the door open, Max is probably going to be ready to go. That's a good car. They probably won't have the same kind of stability issues with it that they did this weekend in Monaco. I'm taking Max for the win. And then I think that I will take another team on a hot streak in Ferrari, and I'll take Charles Leclerc, P2.
Nice. Max and Charles. All right. I've got Lando. So in second, I will take Sergio Perez. He's a proud man. He was embarrassed this week. I think he's going to step it up, and he knows that track well. So I'm going to go with Sergio. Then I'm going to go with Charles's teammate, Carlos Sainz. I think he's tired of losing out to Leclerc. So Lando, Sergio, Charles on the podium right now.
Carlos.
Yeah, right.
Which is basically Charles in Spanish, right? So
You're probably right. I hadn't thought of that.
Let's see. Then I guess.
But hold on, because now that made me think, well, what is Leclerc and Sainz? But then that made me think of Crofty when Leclerc won this week in Monaco. He said something about, oh, he's the son of a barber or something. And, just some sort of ridiculous statement. And, I was like, oh, this is what we need. We need to go back to naming people, after their profession. So son of barber, or, now, I mean, he's F1 driver. So that's, it's a nice feat. But anyway, little side.
Yeah, let's see. So I have Max and Charles. I guess rounding out my podium might be fitting to have the other McLaren on there. So I'll take Oscar. He's been driving very well. I expect that to continue to happen. And then I think I'm going to take Lewis.
All right, man. Mercedes finally gets a bit of love. Well, then I'll take George in the fourth spot. And in the fifth spot, I am going to take our favorite Japanese driver, Yuki.
Nice. I like what Yuki is doing. I guess then you mentioned it, Alonso having trouble so far this season, but he is a man of many talents. And I think one of his talents is driving an F1 car. So I am going to say he's going to get that crap Aston up into the top 5.
Nice. So you have Max, Charles, Oscar, Lewis, and Alonso. I have Lando, Sergio, Carlos Sainz, George Russell, and Yuki Tsunoda. Any crazy predictions, son, for Montreal or the remainder of the season?
Well, let's see. Actually, I did want to note something because I think it's awesome. And because we keep talking about how good Yuki has been, Yuki is closer in points to Lewis Hamilton than Lando Norris is to Charles Leclerc, which I think is an outrageous piece of data.
I had not seen that. I mean, I know Lewis has lost a bit, but I'm going to blame most of that on Mercedes and then give credit to Yuki. That's impressive. I did not know that.
Yuki's got a total of 19 points. He's 10th in the driver championship right now. He's 14 points ahead of his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, he's just been doing awesome. So maybe not a crazy stat, but I do think Yuki will finish in the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. But to go along with that, I believe Ollie Behrman will finish in the top 15 of the Drivers' Championship. He's currently 12th. He's driven in one race.
One race for Ferrari. Yeah. Man, that's sort of an indictment of KMag and Logan. And I don't want to be too harsh with Bottas, but Sauber, Zhou, wow. Yeah, that's not good. I'm not sure those were predictions, although they are crazy. I don't think that I have one. I want to have some crazy prediction like, you know, Mercedes shocks us all by putting Yuki in that second seat. But, Yuki has that relationship with Honda. It would be just a brilliant move, I think, by Toto Wolff to get a solid driver and sort of, poke an eye into Honda. But I'm going to go on record and predict that, although that's legit crazy.
Ooh, you know what? I have a crazy prediction. That's maybe not even as crazy as that. And it doesn't have anything to do with this season. It's actually for next season. I think Lewis Hamilton is going to win the Drivers' Championship in 2025, his eighth with
Wow.
Ferrari.
That would be crazy. That would be amazing. That would be legend status, like legend of legend status. That was like, Tom Brady going down to Tampa Bay and winning another Super Bowl. I don't think that will happen. I mean, I think Max and Red Bull, Charles and Ferrari are ready. So he's battling with his teammate. McLaren is getting good. And even if Lando and Oscar don't compete for the driver championship, I think they'll take away enough points. But that would be just absolute legend status. All right. I want to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
You just finished listening to Hard Compound, recorded in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and around the world.